But then, naturally, you go back and check it. And you work the bit-by-bit form of thinking on it and see, now, does it come out in those terms? And if it does, everybody will agree with you, yes, that's the answer. But if it doesn't come out in those terms, they won't agree with you. Because you haven't subjected it to the socially acceptable traditional form of analyzing knowledge. But here's the problem. It takes an awful long time to check these things out. It takes an awful long time to arrive at the solution which you got, like that, by a purely calculative process. And most of the situations of life are such that they don't wait for us to make up our minds. So that an enormous amount of carefully worked out scientific knowledge is trivial. It's all very well, very finely worked out, but much too late. Because life presents you, life comes at you from all sides, all over everywhere at once. And the only thing you've got to deal with that is the thing inside here in the skull. Now, I'm not saying this to put down all this marvelous work of calculation brought to immense sophistication electronically and so on. Not at all, because actually you people are the first people to understand the limitations of your own kind of knowledge. And you're going to have to tell the politicians about this. They don't understand. They think that this kind of knowledge is the answer to everything. And I think most of you know it isn't. Which is not something, I repeat, against technology. It's only saying that when you walk, you put your right foot forward. And that's fine, but then you must put your left foot forward. So let's say that the great technological enterprise has been putting the right foot forward. But you must bring up the left foot. That is to say, bring up re-evaluation and new respect for the organic type of organization, which is incomprehensible to technological thinking, but which always underlies it. That by itself doesn't work, because after you bring the left foot up, you've again got to bring up the right foot. The analytic. After goo comes prickles. After prickles comes goo. And you have to keep this thing up. And I think our danger at the present time is that we are so heady, so delighted with the results of prickles, that we've got to let back a little bit of goo into the system. Well, now, what we've got to try and do is, I think, to work out a way.
2 lines, practically, for $70.
Yeah. Of making the brain itself more efficient.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that civilized education has neglected. Lynn White, I have to quote him again, he used to say that the academic world today only values 3 kinds of intelligence. Verbal intelligence, mnemonic intelligence, in other words, good at remembering, and computational intelligence. He said it entirely neglects kinesthetic intelligence, social intelligence, and he had at least 7 kinds of intelligence. I forget what they all were. But it is this extraordinary capacity of the neural organization, say, to engage in pattern recognition and in solving instantly certain complex problems without knowing how it does it. But the trouble is, when you do something you don't know how to do, you've got a non-repeatable experiment, in a certain sense. In other words, you can't explain to someone else how to put it together. But you can do it like you can open and close your hand without any knowledge of physiology. Do it every time. Whoops, I don't know how I do it. I just do it, you see. So we have an enormous potential of intelligence, of knowing how to do all sorts of things, which, to the extent that we are academically minded people, we won't allow ourselves to do, because we can't explain it. You know, for example, there's a way of cooling a brazing furnace. It's very simple. But engineers say it's theoretically impossible. It can't happen. It's like bees can't fly by the laws of aerodynamics, but they do. So the rather practical issue I come to is this, that the technology, if it relies exclusively on linear thinking, is going to destroy the environment. It's going to become too complicated to handle. Man is going to be like the dinosaur, which had to have a brain in its head and a brain in its rump because it was so big. You know, the caveman kept a dinosaur, and when he went to bed at night, he'd clump it on the tail with a club, and it'd scream at 8 o'clock in the morning. Wake him up. And it seems to me we're getting into that kind of saurian situation with our technology, which is going to lead us to extinction. So the question is, are we going to foul things up by insisting on using linear input information and controlling it as the dominant tool of controlling the world? Or can we master all that as we have done and still use the linear input and analysis, but with a fundamental trust in our power to assimilate multiple input, although we really don't know how we do it? And my point is that you can't find an absolute which you can pin down, you see. So there always remains in any human operation the basic central thing, which you can't pin down because it's you. Just as the teeth can't bite themselves. Now, the assumption of Judeo-Christian culture is that man in his nature is sinful and therefore can't be trusted. The assumption of at least ancient Chinese culture is that man in his essential nature is good and therefore has to be trusted. Because they say to us, if you can't trust your own basic nature, you can't really rely on the idea that you're untrustworthy. Therefore, you're hopelessly fouled up. So this has amazing political and other consequences, this different assumption. If we say, no, we human beings are fallible and basically selfish and really, really fundamentally evil, and therefore we need law and order. We need a control system to put us in order. We thereby project these control systems into the church or into the police or into somebody who are really ourselves disguised. See, it's like daylight saving time. Everybody could simply get up an hour earlier. But instead of doing that, we alter the clock, because the clock is a kind of authority. And we say, well, the clock says it's time for you to get up. And the Amerindians laugh at the palefaces because they say, paleface, he doesn't know when he's hungry until he looks at his watch. And so in this way, we become clock dominated. and the abstract system
They spend a lot of time
takes over from the physical, organic situation. And this is my big pitch, if I'm going to make a big pitch, is that we've run into a cultural situation where we've confused the symbol with the physical reality, the money with the wealth, and the menu with the dinner. And we're starving on eating menus, 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 starving on eating.
So anyway, the more I work with it, and I never typed to it, I talked to it, and that totally changed the way I feel about it.
On the answer, no second guesses of where what I want.
I'm fascinated.
I find it a little difficult to say what the subject matter.
This is the most interesting
Well, now,
right now.
What do they do?
what I want to do is have a mutual brain pick.
I was just in a room about 20 minutes before I came into this room, and the guy is arguing with it to find out the here, let me see, what did they call it? The Riemann, the fucking oh Jesus Christ. Anyway, some stupid like X prize for mathematics for prime numbers, and he's literally trying to solve. Like, the guy was insane, but he's sitting there having a full conversation with it on Clubhouse and trying to invite people off his mathematical hypothesis. In other words, he's just going into a loop mathematically.
Was his name CM?
No, I know CM. It's not him. Sorry. But it's kind of like what CM's actually a lot more sane than this guy, thank God.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And CM's pretty crazy, so, yeah.
Yeah, he used to be on with a different name. He showed up in one of my rooms a couple days ago, and I encouraged him to leave.
I told him to fuck off about a week or so ago, and he got the message and left me alone for a while. Then he came into my room a couple days ago, and
Do you know anything about him? What's his story?
Don't know. I know what he said. It's the same with anyone on this app. You know what they say.
Well, yeah, you don't know. That's all you ever know.
Yeah, I don't want to know more. In other words, all I know is he was being a douchebag to me, and I said, "Hey, stop it."
He wasn't. He was just boring me. He was just going on about a bunch of metaphysical bullshit that I had no interest in whatsoever.
Yeah. But at any rate, this was a different guy, and I found, I had another lady that was talking to it about esoteric things. She's from England, and she was trying to get it to protect her children because of the laws that are changing in the Great Britain for child protective services, so on and so forth, and blah, blah, blah. But she was using it to help her with a lawsuit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just it's astonishing what the kinds of... I go to it probably at least 10 times a day with some stupid passing question, and it's just astonishing, and it's not life-changing or anything, but still, every time I do it, it just astonishes me. I just learned about the music culture in early 19th century England or London and Paris, the amateur music. I'd never really thought about it, and I'm still astonished and saddened that we've lost something that really existed for a while, for half a century maybe. There were amateur
Tell me more, because that's my favorite time period, is the late 1800s. I feel like that was
no, but I'm talking about the early 1800s, not the late 1800s. It's already passed by then.
What year are you talking about? Because music is different.
Early 1800s. I'm talking about Haydn.
1820?
I'm talking about Haydn in particular. Okay. He made about a third, I should say, between 30 and 40% of his income came from publishing music that was sold in music stores to amateur musicians who took that music home and played that music with their family and friends at parties. They didn't have record stores to buy Michael Jackson's latest hit. They went to the music publisher and bought Haydn's latest piano trios.
Right. This is. I looked him up. He was around from 1730 to. That's a long life. 1730 to
Michael's
1820.
Eternal.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's. Yeah,
So,
that's.
so we're talking about really the 1790s up to the 18.
We're talking about the
basically.
beginning of America.
Beginning of
250 years ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. But anyway, that was a new thing. The composers had always been under the auspices of some prince or something like that. They were servants of the court essentially. But Haydn was one of the first composers who actually made a significant amount of his money, not from patronage, but from selling, for instance, his piano trios, which are among my favorite pieces that I listen to all the time. He wrote like 45 of these piano, violin, and cello. And those were sold by publishers in stores that sold sheet music. And there was a whole upper middle class that had just emerged as a result of the Industrial Revolution and a whole bunch of other shit that never existed. There were people who had extra money and extra room to buy pianos. You couldn't go to a store and buy a piano in 1600, you know. But in 1820, you could, and there were enough people who could afford to do that. That was part of the upper middle class. Was this playing real music, and the daughters of these people who had time and some leisure. There were some astonishing musicians. They didn't play in orchestras, and they weren't famous or anything, but there were a lot of really amazingly accomplished female pianists whose brothers and fathers played viola or cello or violin or something else. And anyway, so Haydn was writing music for these people.
Interesting. For the masses, you're saying?
Well, it was
the masses of the upper
yeah, well, there was a group of people who could afford this now that never existed before, and they were concerned. And again, they didn't have any TV. What are they going to do when they do it?
Sure. No, that makes perfect. I love this time period. I'm just telling you, a little later, this is just me personally.
Yeah,
sure. To do with Haydn. Yeah. But I love the time period between 1850 and like 1900, like right before Nikola Tesla came on the scene.
Yeah,
I love that time period.
Yeah, I'm not a historian, so I don't know anything about it.
I used to love history, but the reason I love that time period is there was this renaissance between like mysticism, spirituality, science, electricity, there was this like convergence of all these things together. It's a lot like the time now. It's about to happen of convergence, but it was a real convergence.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think part of the work. Well, the caterpillar is disintegrating, but the butterfly is integrating, and it's coming upon itself pretty quickly, and I expect to see that accelerating in the very near future.
So Haydn was a contemporary of Mozart? I'm saying here? I didn't know that.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
It says they were friends. The relationship is not very well documented, but the evidence that they enjoyed each other's company is strong.
Yeah. Most people think Mozart gets all the glory between the two of them. And personally,
well, it says Haydn actually created the quartet.
Haydn did a lot of shit. I think Mozart is a hack compared to Haydn. Mozart wrote a lot of shit. He wrote dinner music for for his patrons that he didn't give any thought to at all. He just knocked this shit out because that was what he had to do. Haydn never wrote he wrote pieces for his students, okay, to perform for their families. And those pieces, some of those are these piano trios that I was talking about. There's a couple of those piano trios that really weren't written for anything other than his students, and then they performed in front of the family and stuff. And
that's
yet
cool.
Those pieces, though, are as creative and amazing as stuff, as anything else here. He didn't write anything unless he gave it 100%. Mozart wrote some great stuff, no question, but he also wrote a lot of shit for money.
For sure. I mean, it was a different time.
No, it was the same time.
No, I'm saying it was a different time than now.
Oh yeah, it was a different world. Who knows? All I know is I've never heard a piece of Haydn's music that I didn't find something special in it. and I listen to a lot of Mozart stuff. It's very good, but I don't hear much of it that I hear something that's really special.
And what moves you about Haydn's pieces? Meaning, is there a specific piece that
Well, I've just been concentrating on the piano trios recently for the last couple of years. There are like 47 of them. I don't know, 45 or 47. And I'm really sort of limited. I've been listening to Bach piano and mostly Buri Pariah playing the English suites and some other stuff, and Shostakovich string quartets. So I got piano, Haydn's piano trio, Shostakovich string quartets, and Bach piano stuff. And that's about all I've listened to for the last 10 years, is those three. I've spread out recently. I started listening to some, what's his name, the other
I think what's really interesting about classical music is there's so many. It's almost as diverse as all the music we have today. Like, meaning from R&B and soul to techno music. Like, there's that many different nuances in classical.
Well, there's different time periods too. I mean, you go back to the Baroque or the Renaissance, and then all right up through modern music. I mean, there are at least like 10 or 12 pretty clear distinctions along that way, and then within each of those time periods, there's several different modes. So yeah, it's complex.
Yeah, and it looks like I never really researched or studied any deep study of classical music, other than a friend of mine had one of those CD, of all the different composers, those giant $400 CD.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All the greatest
hits. Time. Yeah, and I had listened to the whole thing. And,
oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, and I like to make music, so the reason I'm asking is I have this new device in my music software called Frictionless Strings.
Found in the crops, they stop GMOing the food, engineering it, genetically modifying it, and
very helpless. I guess I was over the faithful departed. To the mercy of God, rest in peace. Hail, Holy Queen. Mother of mercy, hail our life, our sweetness, and our
everything else is commentary. Every feeling makes a subconscious impression, and unless it is counteracted by
a very specific violin or a cello. Yeah. It's hard to. I don't even know how to explain it properly.
Well, you just did. I know.